So welcome. This is the second talk. It's going to be much more hands-on than the first one. I'm hopefully not going to do nearly as much talking. So to get started, I wanted to talk about Food Critic. It is for linting cookbooks. It doesn't just lint Ruby. It lints a lot of Chef DSL, which is kind of mostly Ruby, but not quite. Food Critic's really not actually that good at linting, sadly, but it's better than nothing. All of the rules follow the format FC followed by 3 digits, and they're padded with zeros, so 001 and on. So at the bottom, there's some bash example of switching to a cookbook. Food Critic dot will run Food Critic, and you can pass the -t in a particular rule, and it will only look for that rule. This is some Ruby from a cookbook. This is kind of showing the oddity of Food Critic. This top half here violates a Food Critic rule 25, which is don't do that, basically. And the bottom part, which does the exact same thing, you'll notice the only difference is there's no r equals and then r.round action, just called round action at the end of the block. Food Critic won't catch this at all. It'll only catch the top one. So the point I wanted to make is that don't go by Food Critic all the time. If something looks wrong, it's probably still wrong. The Food Critic's just not catching it. It's gotten a lot better over the last year or so, but it's not there yet.
I've noticed in some of the other cookbooks I've seen, like especially OpenStack,
Yeah.
They actually have comments of things like we know it violates this, but we're doing it anyway.
Yes, there are. Most people tend to ignore a certain set of Food Critic rules. There are sometimes good reasons. Like there are a lot of rules around execute blocks and how you shouldn't use execute blocks, and there are good reasons to do it anyway. It's not uncommon. It's usually nice to leave a comment saying this violates a rule, but it's not necessary.
So it seems like a good idea if we ever end up having to do that.
Yes. Yes.
You should always talk to you or some other person.
Yeah.
Chef before actually doing it.
Yeah, it's usually a good idea to do that. So this here is a picture of the Food Critic website. That's a little hard to see, but essentially they have a nice little 2-column page where they show you the stuff that's breaking and how you can fix it. I'll show you a little bit better example of that in a minute. So if you're on Food Critic and you have this in your recipe, that's the error it shows you, the bash at the top, and below that's the Ruby that's in the recipe, same as I just showed you earlier. The fix to that is just using ChefGem instead of doing all of this stuff. As you can see, it's been fixed in the modified version. Food Critic's website is actually really nice. The rules are pretty easy to understand. That's all I really wanted to say about Food Critic. It's nice. You should use it. Don't always trust it to do everything correctly. Test Kitchen is a much different beast. So I wanted to define a couple of terms before we really got into Test Kitchen. There's a target, which is a combination of driver, platform, suite, and provisioner as well. But provisioner and platform are a little bit odd. I'll talk about that in a minute. The driver is what tells Test Kitchen how to spin up a VM. Platform is the OS it's running on. Suite is basically chef run list plus other options. Targets are named as suite-platform. You notice there's no provisioner and there's no driver, which is odd. But it turns out that each platform can only have one driver and one provisioner. So if you want to use multiple drivers like Vagrant, OpenStack, you have to have multiple platforms. Most people just use Vagrant, and then they provide an extra config for OpenStack or for Amazon or Rackspace or other cloud platforms. The other odd thing is that all of the driver configs and platform, basically all the configs can be nested into each other. So a platform can have a set of configurations, and each suite can overwrite those with its own platform configurations. I'll show you an example of that in a little bit. In general, if you set the config under its proper category, then it's just a default, but there's no guarantee that'll actually happen. Here's an example of a .kitchen.yaml. So the provisioner is Chef Solo. Platforms, there's only one. Suites, the interesting one is the wiki one, where we actually changed the driver config to add some editing for the port for us. So anywhere, if you drop just the driver config, it says use the default driver, but change the config. If you add driver plugin and a name, it'll use a driver. We could do that to use OpenStack or some other driver. Then all suites have to have a run list. Run list can be entirely empty and do nothing. That's fine, but you need one. So if you were to run kitchen list using this .kitchen.yaml, which we'll do in a little bit, you'll see it gives you a list of your instances or targets, tells you which driver or which provisioner they're using. It says the last action, which is essentially the status. Right now, none of them were created, so they're all not created. The other thing I wanted to show you is a little bit of the test directory, which we'll get to play around with in a little bit. Under test integration, all of your integration tests will be under the name of the suite. So if you have your list of suites, have default, wiki, and style, there's no test for style, but there are tests for default and wiki. You can see right here. Underneath that, there is the testing framework you're using. In this case, I'm using ServerSpec. Underneath that is any Ruby files. If it's .rb, it will get run. Buster will handle that, and we'll run it with the right frameworks and everything. One thing that a lot of people do that when they're first using Test Kitchen is they name the Ruby file after the test framework they're using. It's a bad idea because Ruby does local and relative includes. So if you name it ServerSpec, if you literally name it ServerSpec.rb, it's just really obscure error because you're trying to include itself in itself, which comes from this requirement require ServerSpec. If you name the file ServerSpec, it'll try and require itself and explode. So ServerSpec, you include some helpful little things. Here's basically just an example. List of packages. Packages should be installed, and you can also use should not. You want to negate it. Don't try and just throw a not in there. It won't work. Package basically just says be installed and should not be installed. There's no other things you can do with packages. So what I want you all to do first is clone this repo, ocosl-cookbook/osl-test-cookbook on GitHub. I'll do that right now.
Should we clone it in a specific place?
Wherever you want.
Okay. Because I don't know.
No. No, because we're not going to do anything with the chef server directly for the moment. So if you guys have already, you should all have something set up for your chef repos. You can clone it in there. You can just clone it somewhere else entirely. I occasionally will run a bunch of stuff in temp because I can. And you should create a branch. I really like it when people namespace their branches because then I don't have to worry about what you call your branches. And if we both want to call our branches catch random crap, we can, but we'll namespace them under our names. So slash usernames, well, actually that first slash shouldn't be, that should be username slash learn stuff. You can put that slash there. Will get kind of weird. So some things you can all start doing. One in that cookbook, there's some tests for the default recipe. They don't work right now. Well, about half of them pass, half of them don't pass. You should start and run it. You can run kitchen test default-CentOS-65 and see what happens. See which tests fail. Take a look at the tests. For this recipe, assume that the tests are right and that the recipe is wrong.